Hello and welcome to this first look exploring session, our third session looking at Two Tragedies in One, or Two Lamentable Tragedies by Robert Yarington. It's been a rollercoaster murder mystery ride. I'd say it's a mystery. There's no mystery. We know who did it. We knew who they were going to do it to from the very beginning. It's been more a why done it in some instances and how are they going to get caught done it. And in fact, there's a lot of ambiguity in the text at the moment as to how they're going to get caught. The net, we feel, is closing in on the London murderer, the hammer murderer of Lambeth, and whereas over in Italy, the finger has been firmly pointed, but precisely what the nature of the justice/retribution will be, we shall see. To find out how the two tragedies end, we have this wonderful team of readers and invisible lurkers as well, who may be throwing in their comments later. But reading today the part of Merry and Homicide, Murder, etc. is...
Lois Potter, quite harmless, really, living in London.
Reading Mary's sister Rachael and the Duke is...
Hello, I'm Valentina. I am an Italian actor and voiceover artist in London.
And the part of Rachael is not to be confused with any other Rachels who may or may not be reading Cowley and Truth. Cowley and Truth read by...
Nicole, actor in New Jersey.
Reading Allenso and Constable today is...
You've changed his name to confuse me. It's Alan Scott, based in Suffolk.
No. Allenso and Constable is Briony.
First watch is what
Allenso and Constable.
Briony. It's definitely Briony. Don't be stealing my lines, Alan, or I will...
No, sorry. Pardon. Apologies.
Do introduce yourself, Briony.
Yes, I don't threaten people normally. Sorry about that, Alan. I'm Briony. I'm a nice person in Lincolnshire.
The murder vibes are spreading, I can tell. Reading Alberto and First Watchman is...
Right, that is me.
And you are?
Anonymous.
Okay. Reading Turqualo and Covetousness / Avarice is...
I'm Eric, and, well, I guess we'll find out what happens next. I'm kind of hoping for a good cop, bad cop situation, but I mean, that's just me.
Reading the wicked Fallerio is...
Hello, my name's Francis Cox. I'm an actor living in Amsterdam.
Reading Sostrata and an officer is...
I'm Lalitte. I'm a teacher in Paris.
Reading Williams and Third Watchman is...
Hi, I'm Lynn. I'm also a teacher living in the United States. I'm not a nice person, but I don't think I would go so far as to pull a Mary thing.
Yeah, we can all say that's a line we're not going to cross. I think that's a reasonable expectation. Reading Vesuvio and Second Watchman is...
Hello, Dan, actor based in Montpellier, France.
And I'm your host, Robert Crighton, desperately scanning through my list to make sure that I haven't missed anyone out. No, I don't think I have. Okay, we're going to dive back into the play in Act 4. Act 4, Scene 5. We've just had a lengthy sequence in London where the various neighbours, having assembled all the various body parts that they've been able to find, have created something of a gruesome jigsaw of the dead man Beach. They've got a witness to someone who bought one of the items used in the disposal of the body. He's been going around door to door asking if looking for to identify the person who bought that item. So far has failed. We shift slightly sideways into another scene in London as we go to the murderer and accomplice. Enter Merry and Rachael for Act 4, Scene 5.
Why go the neighbours round about the street to every house? What? Hast thou heard the cause?
They go about with the same Salter man, of whom I bought the bag but yesterday, to see if he can know the maid again which bought it. This, I think, the very cause.
How were my senses overcome with fear that I could not foresee this jeopardy? For had I brought the bag away with me, they had not had the means to find it out. Hide thee above, lest that the salter's man take notice of thee that thou art the maid, and by that knowledge we be all undone.
That fear is past. I spake with him, yet he denies that I did buy the bag. Besides, the neighbours have no doubt of you, saying you are an honest, harmless man, and made inquiry here for fashion's sake.
My former life deserves their good conceits, which is not blemished with this treachery. My heart is merrier than it was before, for now I hope the greatest fear is past. The hammer is denied, the bag unknown. Now there is left no means to bring it out, unless ourselves prove traitors to ourselves.
When saw you Harry Williams?
Why, today. I met him coming home from Paul's Cross, where he'd been to hear a sermon.
Why brought you not the man along with you to come to dinner, that we may persuade him to continue in his secrecy?
I did entreat him, but he would not come, but vowed to be as secret as myself.
What? Did he swear?
What need you ask me that? You know we never heard him swear an oath. But since he hath concealed the thing thus long, I hope in God he will conceal it still.
Pray God he do, and then I have no doubt but God will overpass this grievous sin. If you lament with true unfeigned tears, and seek to live the remnant of your years in good, true God-fear, with upright conscience.
If it would please him pardon this amiss, and rid my body from the open shame that doth attend this deed being brought to light, I would endeavour all my coming days to please my Maker and exalt his praise. But it grows late. Come, bring me to my bed, that I may rest my sorrow-charged head.
Rest still in calm, secure tranquillity, and overblow this storm of mighty fear with pleasant gales of hoped quietness. Go when you will. I will attend, and pray to send this woeful night a cheerful day.
And they exit. There's some interesting little backs and forths going on here. Rachel's really thinking about some of the problems, the logistical. I love the way that Mary says, "Oh no, I've done this, everything's fine." Yeah, have you seen Mary recently? The person who knows the thing. I like the fact that it's straightforward. Salter doesn't actually recognise Rachael when he saw her earlier, so it's not that somebody else in the household's picked up the bag or whatever. It's just simply eyewitnesses are rubbish, and that's actually a nice little detail. I like that. It's either that, also when Rachael appeared in the previous scene, maybe she's sort of just going, no, we don't have any maids here, no, or something like that. I really like the way Mary is bargaining with God.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I'll praise God if he lets me do the bad things, get away with the bad things. The rest of my life, I'll be fine. That's not how it works, man. It's doing all sorts of business. Thoughts on the room, Eric, then Lynn.
Well, it's basically the exact kind of bargaining that we saw yesterday with Cain and Abel in the Townley place.
Yeah, murderers don't change, do they? Murderers don't change. Lynn.
I just want to say I'm a little bit excited about reading Williams later, because I think there might be a little foreshadowing here. What about Williams? Oh, he's fine. So kind of looking forward to that.
Yeah, because we had a scene a little while ago where Williams basically down the pub going, "Oh God, I've got these troubles in my life. I can't tell you, mate. I can't tell you." So he hasn't spilt the beans yet, but he's on the edge. And they did invite him to dinner, but frankly, I wouldn't turn up. Briony, Rachael, then Lois.
I know, obviously, we've mentioned that he does like these puns on his own name, but that one in particular, I really like, because he's almost saying, like, now that he's been really murdery, he feels more himself than he ever had. My heart is merrier than it was before. Like, it's almost like he's true to himself now.
Yeah, it's always nice when somebody finds out, where they fit in the universe. It's heartwarming. Rachael.
Yeah, a little bit to what Briony said is about him being true to himself. It's kind of like the dumb show in the beginning. Now that we're having truth and homicide kind of be one and the same, as opposed to being like opposed to each other in that dumb show, if that makes sense. And I was also going to say that Rachael seems to be a little more calculating in this scene than she has been previously, where it seemed she was more unwilling to participate.
Well, that's the thing. She's in it now. She's thorough. She can't back out of it. So she's just got to make sure that Mary, who doesn't look awfully stable, stays on path. So yeah, it must be nerve-wracking for Rachel. I think that's what's probably quite fun about the part, actually, is just constantly walking on eggshells around everything, because everything's a danger to her. Lois.
Yeah, that reference to Williams hearing a sermon at Paul's Cross might turn out to be significant. Paul's Cross, you can still see where it was located near St. Paul's, was the place that all the best preachers were. It was sort of an honor to preach there. And if Williams has heard a real hellfire sermon about the danger of concealing crimes or something, it might have an effect on him.
Yeah. Other thought, Eric?
I was going to say that I kind of really hoped that, Rachael would then kind of go, yeah, I might murder this guy in his sleep, just because, it's like a family thing. I don't know, family business. But I don't know, maybe that's just me.
Okay. We have spent quite a long time in London, if we include where we were last time. It's been a while since we nipped over to Italy. So shall we pop over to Padua? Shall we find out what's going on there? A boy has been murdered, and the murderers have, or at least one of them has confessed. And the person who commissioned the crime is probably not in a great place. So Act 4, Scene 6. Enter Fallerio and Sostrata weeping.
Pass all these rugged furrows of laments, and come to plainer paths of cheerfulness. Cease these thy continual showers of thy woe, and let my pleasing words of comfort chase these dusky clouds of thy unjust despair far from thy heart, and let a pleasing hope of young Pertillus' happy safe return establish all your ill-divining thoughts. So shall you make me cheerful that am sad, and feed your hopes with fond delusions.
I could be so, but my divided soul, twixt fear and hope of young Pertillus' life, cannot arrive at the desired port of firm belief until mine eyes do see him that I sent to know the certainty.
To know the certainty? Of whom? Of what? Who? Whether, when, or whereabout, I pray? Have you dispatched a frustrate messenger? By heaven and earth, my heart misgiveth me, they will prevent my cunning policy. Why speak you not? What winged Pegasus is posted for your satisfaction?
Methinks my speech reveals a hidden fear, and that fear tells me that the child is dead.
By sweet Andrew and my father's soul, I think the peevish boy be too well. But speak, who was your passion's harbinger?
One that did kindle my misdoubting thoughts with the large flame of his timidity.
Oh, then I know the tinder of your fear was young Allenso, your white honey son. Confusion light upon his timorous head for broaching this large stream of fearfulness, and all the plagues that damned furies feel for their forepast bold iniquities afflict you both for thus preventing me.
Preventing you? Of what? Fallerio, speak, for if you do not, my poor heart will break.
Why, of the good that I had purposed to young Pertillo, which I would conceal from you and him until the deed were done.
If it were good, then we affect him dear, and would add furtherance to your enterprise.
And I say your close eavesdropping policies have hindered him of greater benefits than I can ever do him after this. If he live long and grow to riper sin, he'll curse you both that thus have hindered his freedom from this goal of sinful flesh. But let that pass, when went your harebrained son, that cuckoo, virtue-singing, hateful bird, to guard the safety of his better part, which he hath penned within the childish coop of young Pertilla's sweet scrutiny?
That lovely son, that comfort of my life, the root of virtuous magnanimity, that doth affect with unfeigned love that tender boy which under heaven's bright eye deserveth most to be affected dear, went some 2 hours after the little boy was sent away to keep at Padua.
What is a lovely? Is a loathsome toad, a one-eyed cyclops, a stigmatic brat that durst attempt to contradict my will and pry to my close intentments.
Enter Allenso sad.
Mass, here he comes. His downcast, sullen look is overweighed with mighty discontent. I hope the brat is posted to his sire, that he's grown so lazy of his base, forgetful of his duty and his tongue, is even fast tied with strings of heaviness. Come hither, boy. Saw'st thou my obstacle, that little dromus that crept into my son, with friendly hand removed and thrust away? Say aye, and please me with the sweetest note that ever relished in a mortal's mouth.
I am a swan that sings before I die, your note of shame and coming misery.
Speak softly, son, let not thy mother hear. She was almost dead before for very fear.
Would I could roar as instruments of war, wall-battering cannons when the gunpowder is touched with part of Etna's element. Would I could bellow like enraged bulls, whose hearts are full of indignation, to be captived by humane policy. Would I could thunder like almighty Jove, that sends his far-heard voice to terrify the wicked hearts of earthly citizens. Then, roaring, bellowing, thundering, I would say, Mother, lament, Pertillo's made away.
What? Is he dead? God give me leave to die, and him repentance for his treachery.
And Sostrata falleth down and dies.
Never the like impiety was done. A mother slain with terror of her son. Help to repair the damage thou hast made, and seek to call back life with diligence.
Call back a happy creature to more woe? That were a sin, good father, let her go. Oh, happy I, if my tormenting smart could rend like hers my grief-afflicted heart. Would your hard heart extend unto your wife, to make her live an ever-dying life? What, is she dead? Oh, then thrice happy she, whose eyes are barred from our calamity.
Ah, all too soon, thou viper, parricide. But for all thy tongue, thy mother had not died. That belching voice, that harsh night raven sound, untimely sent thy mother to the ground. Upbraid my fault, I did deceive my brother. Cut out thy tongue that slew thy careful mother.
God love my soul, as I in heart rejoice to have such power in my death-bringing voice. See how instead of tears and hearty sighs, of folded arms and sorrow-speaking looks, I do behold with cheerful countenance the liveless root of my nativity, and thank her hasty soul that thence did go, to keep her for her son and husband's woe. Now, father, give attention to my tale. I will not dip my grief-deciphering tongue in bitter words of reprehension. Your deeds have thrown more mischiefs on your head than wit or reason can remove again. For to be brief, Pertillo, oh, that name cannot be named without a hearty sigh, is murdered, and...
What, and? This news is good.
The men which you suborned to murder him...
Better and better, then it cannot out, unless your love will be so scrupulous that it will overthrow yourself and me.
The best is last, and yet you hinder me. The Duke of Padua hunting in the wood, accompanied with lords and gentlemen.
Swoons, what of that? What good can come of that?
was made acquainted by one of them that had some little remnants of his life with all your practice and conspiracy.
I would that remnant had fled quick to hell to fetch fierce fiends to rend their carcasses rather than bring my life in jeopardy. Is this the best? Swoons, do you mock me, son, and make me a jest of my calamity?
Not I, good father, I will ease your woe, but if you yield unto my policy.
Declare it then. My wits are now to seek. That piece of life hath so confounded me that I am wholly overcome with fear.
The Duke hath vowed to prosecute your life with all the strict severity he can, but I will cross his resolution and keep you from his fury well enough. I'll wear your habit. I will seem the man that did suborn the bloody murderers. I will not stir from out this house of woe, but wait the coming of the officers and answer for you for the angry Duke, and, if need be, suffer your punishment.
Oh, none of that. I do not like the last. I love thee dearer than I do my life, and all I did was to advance thy state to some bright beams of shining happiness.
Doubt not my life, for when I do appear before the Duke, I being not the man, he can inflict no punishment on me.
Mass, thou sayest true. I cannot punish thee. Thou wert no actor of their tragedy. But for my beard thou canst not counterfeit and bring grey hairs upon thy downy chin. White frosts are never seen in summer's spring.
I bought a beard this day at Padua, such as our common actors used to wear, when youth would put on age's countenance, so like in shape, in colour, and in all, to that which grows upon your aged face, that were I dressed in your habiliments, yourself would scarcely know me from yourself.
That's excellent. What shape hast thou devised to be my visit to delude the world?
Why thus, I'll presently shave off your hair, and dress you in a lowly shepherd's weed. Then you will seem to have the careful charge of some wealth-bringing rich and fleecy flock, and so pass current from suspicion.
This care of thine, my son, doth testify nature in thee hath firm predominance, that neither loss of friend nor vile reproach can shake thee with thy strongest violence. In this disguise I'll see the end of thee, that thou, acquitted, then mayst succour me.
I am assured to be exempt from woe. This plot will work my certain overthrow.
I will bear hence thy mother and my wife, untimely murdered with true sorrow's knife.
And exit Fallerio, presumably with body.
Untimely murdered? Happy was that grief which hath abridged whole numbers numberless of heart surcharging deplorations. She shall have due and Christian funeral, and rest in peace amongst her ancestors. As for our bodies, they shall be interred in ravening moors of ravens, puttocks, crows, of tattling magpies, and death's harbingers, that will be glutted with wind-shaken limbs of blood-delighting hateful murderers. And yet these many-winged sepulchres shall turn to earth, so I and father shall at least attain to earth by funeral. At last attain to earth by funeral. Well, I will prosecute my policy, that wished death may end my miseries.
And they exit, and of course this is what we were all expecting to happen. I mean, it was obviously the son was going to dress up as his father and help him escape. And I mean, I think considering the earlier scene with the two parents to Portillo, of whom we never really got a particularly good idea of what was wrong with them when they died, I think everybody in this extended family has a history of a genetic heart condition, because any kind of shock and they just poof, they're down. I mean, I think Portillo's parents, I think they just read something awkward in the paper and just went and were off. The Italian plot is doing some really odd things. It's doing very different business. It's much more florid. There's a lot more speechifying, and it's doing disguising plots. It's it still continues to be. It's a fascinating contrast with what's going on in London. It's like this is very different world. I like the sort of misdirection at the beginning of the scene, and we have these little things at the beginning of scenes that I'm quite liking, where you see the Sostrata weeping at the beginning, and where we left the Italian plot, you'd sort of be thinking, oh, you've been caught doing murder things or something. That's where we'd be, but actually no, it's a totally different. The news has not reached them yet. She doesn't know what's happened to Patillo and doesn't know who commissioned it. So yeah, it's doing all sorts of interesting work. Thoughts from the room? I'll go to Lois.
Yeah, Fallerio, apart from being a complete jerk, I mean, it's all your fault. Your mother just dropped dead. Nothing to do with the fact that she just heard that I'd commissioned a murder. Yes, but then this thing too of no, I won't let you sacrifice yourself for me because I love you so much. After he's called him every name in the book for ages. I mean, it's just I don't know. Either this is a brilliant portrayal of a terribly inconsistent person, or it's an extremely inconsistent portrayal. Whatever.
I was thinking that for a second because I was reading him, but then I think the point is he isn't actually doing it out of the duty to his dad so much as he would literally rather die for his dad's crimes than have to live to see the outcome of all this.
It's very emotionally driven, isn't it? I mean, people do things because they love someone very dearly, so it's coming across as much more melodramatic in a way, because it's all no, that's the wrong word.
Well, in the sense that formal sense of melodrama, heading in it, you have a direction of travel, you head for it in an absolute sense. You may immediately change direction into a different emotional state, and the switcheroo between them is much more extreme. I think that's a reasonable way of putting it. Rachael, then Lynn, then Valentina.
Just how Allenso, he says the truth, and I wonder if he's possessed by truth, or if there isn't some mixing of these, vice and virtue figures from before, because she does die of the truth in a way when that's revealed. If that's homicide and truth uniting in one in this moment.
Right.
Ooh. I like that the different elemental forces that's going on around the play has a very direct effect. Oh, I like that. Lynn.
So I'm sort of responding to Lois's observation that Fallerio at first seems really completely ruthless, completely heartless. And that he says, I did this for you because you're really all I care about, and your material comfort is all I really care about. And is that inconsistent, or is that just not very good writing? My take on it is not really that he's inconsistent. It's consistently, this is everybody's fault but mine. Right? The fact that your mother is dead, well, you just shouldn't have said anything, and I didn't really do it for myself, I did it for you. What's going on here is he's constantly trying to shift the blame and the responsibility. And it doesn't make any damn sense, but that's what he's trying to do.
Well, also, a lot of what Fallerio is saying is not to the people in the room. There are some things that are explicitly listed as asides, but there's also a lot of dashes to indicate that he may be changing direction. So some of the things that might seem inconsistent are because he's not saying he's got one thing pitched to the room and another pitch to the audience. So there might be some unpicking there, and there might be other things that are hidden, as it were, that the first read doesn't bring out in the way that it's functioning. So it might be more to it than that. But yeah, I'm liking all these things. Valentina.
Yeah, it seems to me that it's very much a family comes first kind of like situation, where like for Allenso, once everybody good in his family is passed away, then the only thing that he has is Fallerio. And so he does what he does. And for Fallerio is like, well, like we have a new problem, but the guy, what I was doing would have benefited you as well. It seems to be that kind of weird loyalty to blood that people seem to have that we might not understand fully.
Eric, then Rachael.
I was going to say that it's by this point, because we've seen Fallerio lie, we've seen him, order the murder, blah, blah. We kind of don't really trust him as an audience. So it's there's no reason for us to trust what he says at all. Whereas with Allenso, we're already, we kind of are on his side, and we're kind of sort of closer to him as a person. We're kind of yeah, totally tell the truth, speak truth to power, whatever you want to call it. I think at the moment we're trying to justify why he's behaving this way, whereas obviously it's going to be revealed soon, I'm guessing. And it's kind of we're looking for an extra motive, ulterior motive for his behavior.
And remember, Allenso's come from the Duke. He's popped into town. He's bought a beard, and now so he has thought all this through since he left the last scene and entered this one. So all those important beard purchases have been done between now, and he's confident he can pull this off in the way that only people in plays are ever confident about how good their disguises are going to be. Rachael, then Alan.
No, I also wanted to say about Fallerio and the insults that he was throwing at Allenso, whether they're just, hurtful comments and things that he's saying in this tirade and in this, I guess, argument, or if the things like calling him a cyclops, are referring to his actual appearance, and maybe he's missing an eye, and talking about his voice, and maybe his appearance doesn't look like, doesn't match up with the good person that he is on the inside, and he gets people treat him differently for that. And I think maybe that's why he was so affected by his younger cousin, because a child not treating him like I guess the way that Fallerio treats him, or the way that other people treat him, if his appearance is I don't know, just different.
Because the early modern is perfectly capable of making that kind of judgment call on appearance. Yeah, his insults are interesting. And it's also that the way that this scene gives the impression that maybe Fallerio married Sostrata, who happened to already have a son, that it's not... I don't think we can absolutely go that way. But there was just moments in this where you're going, oh, it's not really my son, it's just the son of the person I married. It comes across that way a couple of times, though I think we've got prima facie evidence of that. Alan?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is that at the end of yesterday's session, I'm sure that Allenso was told by the Duke, basically, yes, you can go home, but don't tip the scales or tip off your father that anything's wrong, which he seems to have completely gone again.
Well, yes, because he's effectively sacrificing himself. He's expecting death on some level. So, hey, what's ignoring the Duke to that? What's he going to do? Slap him on the wrist? Fine him severely? Lalitte?
Yes, no, I was just going to say the thing about the son thing. It's when people have an argument and suddenly it's like, tell your daughter to do that, or tell your son, and suddenly, one disowns parentage when the child in question isn't living up to certain expectations. Because the way Sostrata talks about her son is, that lovely son, root of virtuous magnanimity, blah, blah, blah. I mean, she doesn't speak about his appearance, but she obviously thinks he's an absolute paragon.
Or Lynn.
Yeah. This is kind of irrelevant, but we do that with Scooter. It's like whenever he's chewing something up, my husband's like, "Your dog." It's my dog now. It's not. Yeah. When the kid isn't doing what you want him to do, it's always your spouse's kid. Your kid is doing this right now.
Okay, we're going to wing our way back to London. Get on that short haul flight. Act 4, Scene 7. Enter Cowley and, wait for it, Williams.
Still in your dumps, good Harry. Yet at last, utter the motive of this heaviness. Why go you not unto your master's house? What, are you parted? If that be the cause, I will provide you of a better place.
Who roves all day at length may hit the mark. That is the cause, because I cannot stay with him whose love is dearer than my life.
Why fell you out? Why did you part so soon?
We fell not out, but fear hath parted us.
What? Did he fear your truth or honest life?
No, your understanding is but dim. That far removed cannot judge the fear. We both were fearful, and we both did part because indeed we both were timorous.
What accident begot your mutual fear?
That which my heart hath promised to conceal.
Why now you fall into your ancien vein?
'Tis vain to urge me from this silent vein. I will conceal it, though it breed my pain.
It seems to be a thing of consequence, and therefore prithee, Harry, for my love, open this close, fast-clasped mystery.
Were I assured my heart would have release of secret torment and distemperature, I would reveal it to you specially, whom I have found my faithful favorite.
Good Harry Williams, make no doubt of that. Besides your grief revealed may have relief, beyond your present expectation. Then tell it, Harry, whatsoever it be, and ease your heart of horror, me of doubt.
Then, have you heard of Beach of Lambert Hill, and of his boy that late were murdered?
I heard and saw their mangled carcasses.
But have you heard of them that murdered them?
No, would I had, for then I'd blaze their shame and make them pay due penance for their sin.
This I misdoubted, therefore will forbear to utter what I thought to have revealed.
Knowest thou the actors of this murderous deed? And wilt conceal it now the deed is done? Alas, poor man, thou knowest not what thou dost. Thou hast incurred the danger of the law, and thou amongst them must suffer punishment, unless thou do confess it presently.
What? Shall I then betray my master's life?
Better than hazard both thy life and soul, to bolster out such barbarous villainy. Why then belike your master did the deed?
My master unawares escaped my mouth, but what the Lord doth please shall come to light, cannot be hid by human policy. His hapless hand hath wrought the fatal end of Robert Beach and Thomas Winchester.
Could he alone do both those men to death? Hadst thou no share in execution?
Nor knew of it till the deed was done.
If this be true, thou mayst escape with life. Confess the truth unto the officers, and thou shalt find the favor of the law.
If I offended, 'twas my master's love that made me hide his great transgressions. But I will be directed as you please. So save me God, as I am innocent.
I really like this scene for several reasons. One, it follows on from a very similar scene with Cowley earlier, and it hints here, who roves all day at length may hit the mark. Cowley's just been sitting and going, so is it this? Is it this? Is it your master? Oh, got you. And the way it just slowly peels out, and then and he's sort of going, well, you heard about the murder. Oh, is that what you think? Oh, I won't tell you anything then. You know about the murder? And that's all so believable, actually. I really like that, of someone who really wants to tell someone, but they don't want to tell them. And then, and he sort of accidentally says, "Bewray my master's life." Oh, shit. It's really nicely done. And the idea that possibly they've been sitting in a tavern getting slightly drunk as well. Not drunk, just that right level. Lynn.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but there is something kind of naturalistic, something very true to life about this scene. But at the same time, it reminded me a little of some of the previous scenes in the Italian plot, where we're just dragging it painfully out and waiting for the other shoe to drop. But yes, I think both those things are going on there. Great little scene.
Other thoughts, Eric?
I was thinking that it's interesting that he says, "'Twas my master's love that made me hide his great transgressions," because he's basically blackmailing how do you call him, Mary, to give him stuff like the clothes, the chance to go to the fair, some money, that kind of thing. And there's a part of me going, everyone's lying in this play.
Or they're massaging it. It's not a total lie, but yeah, it's that sense that people will try and make them everything what they've done look in the best light. Which seems very natural again. It's nice that the parallels. So I think someone put in the chat. I think it was Eric. Yes, it was. That Williams is sort of the Allenso of London. But he serves a similar function of someone who's going to spill the beans on some level, or second murderer perhaps, who spilled the beans technically last time. So there are nice parallels, but even though it is a bit more, that delayed gratification thing, it's still the way the scenes are written. There's a very deliberate difference in that slightly more florid, less naturalistic approach that the Italian scenes seem to be getting, whereas the London ones feels very hugger-mugger. It feels very down around a table, whisper. Actually, the way you were doing the whispering actually quite naturally just worked really nicely. There's something there actually already coming through. Other thoughts, Eric?
Well, I think also Helen had mentioned yesterday that this was actually the way people spoke in terms of like the based on the sort of Star Chamber stuff she's been looking at. That it kind of it's just the way people interacted basically, and it comes across very naturalistic to us, whereas the Italian one not so much.
But I don't think it matters. I mean, they're just doing different jobs, and they're giving us different flavours. Other thoughts before we fly back to Italy? Where in Italy? I'm not actually sure now. No, okay, we're eager. We're eager to fly back. Act 4, Scene 8. Act 4 is very long, by the way. Act 4, Scene 8. Enter Allenso in Fallerio's apparel and beard. So that scene was as much a costume change as you've got the length of the Cowley Williams scene to get the fake beard on. Fallerio, however, is shaven. So Fallerio's been wearing a fake beard for the whole play. And is now clean shaven. Fallerio shaven in shepherd's habiliments.
Part of myself now seems thou wholly me, and I seem neither like myself nor thee, thanks to thy care and this unknown disguise. I, like a shepherd, now must learn to know when to lead forth my little bleating flock to pleasing pastures and well-fatting walks, in stormy time to drive them to the lea, to cheer the pretty lambs whose bleating voice doth crave the wished for comfort of their dams, to sound my merry bagpipe on the downs in cheering times, poor shepherds' festivals, and lastly, how to drive the wolf away that seek to make the little lambs their prey.
Ah, have you cared to drive the wolf away from silly creatures wanting intellect, and yet would suffer your devouring thoughts to suck the blood of your dead brother's son? As pure and innocent as any lamb Pertillo was, which you have fed upon. But things past, help, may better be bewailed with careful tears than find a remedy. Therefore, for fear our practice be espied, let us to question of our husbandry. How many lambs fell from the middle flock, since I myself did take the latter view?
Some 25, whereof 2 are dead, but 23 send about the fields, that glads my heart to see their jollity.
And delayed stage direction. Enter Vesuvio, Turqualo, and Alberto.
This is the man, conferring of his lambs, that slew a lamb, worth all his flock besides.
What is the time to let the weather's blood? The forward spring that hath such store of grass hath filled them full of rank unwholesome blood, which must be purged, else, when the winter comes, the rot will leave me nothing but their skins.
Chill let 'em blood, but yet it is no time until the zigner be gone below the heart.
Forbear a while this idle business, and talk of matters of more consequence.
She'll tell you plain, you are no honest man to call a shepherd's care an idle toy. What though we have a little merry sport, with flowery guyrlons and an oaten pipe, and jolly friskins on a holiday, yet is a shepherd's cure a greater cark than sweating ploughmen with their busy work.
Hence, leave your sheepish ceremonial. Now, Fallerio, in the prince's name, I do arrest you for the cruel murder of young Pertillo left unto your charge, which you discharged with a bloody writ, signed by the hands of those you did suborn. Nay, look not so strange. We have such evidence to ratify your Stygian cruelty that cannot be deluded anyway.
Alas, my lords, I know not what you say. As for my nephew, he, I hope, is well. I sent him yesterday to Padua.
Aye, he is well, in such avenger's hands as will not wink at your iniquity.
By heaven and earth, my soul is innocent. Say what you will, I know my conscience.
To be afflicted with the scourge of care which my o'erweening rashness did inflict.
Bear him hence, expostulate no more. That heart that could invent such treachery can teach his face to brave it cunningly.
I do defy your accusations. Let me have justice, I will answer it.
So, bear him hence. I mean to stay behind to take possession of his goods and lands. For the Duke's use, it is too manifest.
I hope you'll answer anything you do. My lord Vesuvio, you shall answer it, and all the rest that use extremities.
Aye, to the Duke's exchequer, not to you.
And they all exit apart from Fallerio.
Thus shades are caught when substances are fled. Indeed, they have my garments, but myself am close enough from their discovery, but not so close but that my very soul is racked with torment for Pertillo's death. I am Actaeon, and I do bear about my horns of shame and inhumanity. My thoughts, like hounds which late did flatter me with hope of great succeeding benefits, now gin to tear my care-tormented heart with fear of death and torturing punishment. These are the stings when, as our consciences are stuffed and clogged with close-concealed crimes. Well, I must smother all these discontents and strive to bear a smoother countenance than rugged care would willingly permit. I'll to the court to see Allenso free, that he may then relieve my poverty.
So, Fallerio, sudden late onset conscience, maybe seeing his son being dragged away, or maybe it's just he just can't think he can sustain the uar fake accent that he does to to avoid capture, which works. I mean, I was fully expecting when Vesuvio first said, "And now Fallerio in the prince's name," I thought actually he'd seen through the disguise and was grabbing him and was going, "Enough of this sheepish rigmarole." But no, actually, no. He totally falls for it and turns to the fake Fallerio. They're not the best cops in Italy. I'm going to say not the best. They're not doing the work, are they? Thoughts from the room. I'll go to Francis first.
Yeah, I liked Fallerio's commitment to to this scheme and that first speech he had. It's like, now I've got to do all these kind of shepherdy things to add some authenticity to this disguise.
You can see him sort of walking on with the Osborne book of shepherding, doesn't he? Just going, okay, but this is how it works.
Yeah. Like you, Robert. Who was it? Was it Vesuvio who said, "I arrest you"? I thought he meant Fallerio as well.
But no, he has not seen through the disguise.
No.
He has picked up the younger self. Other thoughts? I thought I saw people waving. Briony, then Eric.
Just I took from that speech, especially the very last line of that speech and that scene, that it is purely selfish. He doesn't want to have to live in this disguise this time, so he's trying to suit his own needs. Once again, he seems to be a real narcissist, this guy.
Lois. No, it was Eric, then Lois.
Well, if Lois wants to interject with the response.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that, we've been talking about how long-winded all the sort of, these Italian scenes are. So hence I enjoyed, Turqualo going, "Come, Burns, hence, expostulate no more." Just basically, shut up, get off stage. Stop hogging the spotlight.
Expostulate no more, yes. Lois, then Lynn.
Yeah, I think presumably all of Fallerio's goods are being confiscated. I mean, and that's the real Fallerio's goods, but it hardly matters which. So he is totally impoverished. And I suppose, generally in drama, when people become poor, they become incredibly poor and usually have to beg. So I suppose he's assuming that since he's too old to beg, his son will beg for him if he survives this elaborate plan, this cunning plot.
Lynn.
Yeah, I agree with Briony that this speech is a reflection of Fallerio's narcissism, but it's also kind of structurally an excuse to do more poetry, an excuse to do more metaphors, and create images that reflect what's going on in the plot. I mean, when he started this, I'm saying this speech, I'm like, oh, are we going to talk about the wolf? Yes, protecting the lamb from the wolf. What does that remind us of? So, yeah, there's just sort of more poetic and metaphorical about this whole strand, about the whole the Italian plot. It's working kind of differently, I feel like, than the English one.
And Fallerio really going for the alliteration at it's clogged with close concealed crimes. That's one to get the tongue around. There are worse, I'm sure. Harder tongue twisters are available. Eric again.
I was going to say that when Vesuvio basically goes, take possession of his goods and lands for the Duke's use, there's a part of me going, yeah, no, it's totally not going to be for the Duke's use. But I think that's just me being paranoid at this point.
Oh no, it's so for the Duke's use, yeah. He's the Duke. He can do what he likes. Lalitte.
Yeah, I'm just sort of noticing that you get the last couplet completely undermines all the poetry, because he gets very practical and says, "I'll to the court to see Allenso free, that he may then relieve my poverty." So much for all the conscience stuff. He's then saying, well, I might still be able to just get my son to keep me in comfort.
Other thoughts? Rachael?
No, Eric just brought up the Duke, and I do wonder if because place where this play was written, you know, there is that issue with all the litigious stuff that happens and all the corruption and bribes, that if you know, the Duke hard accusing Allenso really quickly the last time he saw him, and you know, Vesuvio, you know, just taking somebody in. I wonder if it's, you know, there's not, I wonder if it's less investigation being done because they don't really care who did the crime, if they can just get the lands and the Duke can take them for himself.
Well, that's an interesting thought. Let us conclude, however, Act 4. We are winging our way back to London, and we have a supernatural encounter to close the act as well. So Act 4, Scene 9, enter Constable and 3 Watchmen with halberds.
Who would have thought of all the men alive that Thomas Merry would have done this deed so full of ruth and monstrous wickedness?
All the men that live in London walls, I would have thought that Mary had been free.
Is this the fruits of saint-like Puritans? I never liked such damned hypocrisy.
He would not lose a sermon for £1, an oath he thought would rend his jaw in twain. An idle word did whet God's vengeance on, and yet 2 murders were not scrupulous. Such close illusions God will bring to light and overthrow the workers with his might.
This is the ass. Come, let's knock at door. I see a light. They are not all in bed.
Yes, there's some knocking, and Rachael comes down.
How now, fair maid, is your brother up?
He is not within, sir. Would you speak with him?
You do but jest. I know he's within, and I must needs go up and speak with him.
Indeed, good sir, he is in bed asleep, and I was loath to trouble him tonight.
Well, sister, I am sorry for your sake, but for your brother, he is known to be a damned villain and an hypocrite. Rachael, I charge thee in her highness' name to go with us to prison presently.
To prison, sir? Alas, what have I done?
You know that best, but everyone do know you and your brother murdered Master Beach and his poor boy that dwelt at Lambert Hill.
I murdered? My brother knows that I did not consent to either of their deaths.
That must be tried. Where doth your brother lie?
Here, in his bed. Methinks he's not asleep.
Now, Master Merry, are you in a sweat?
And he throws his nightcap away.
No, verily, I am not in a sweat.
Some sudden fear affrights you. What's the cause?
Nothing, but that you waked me unawares.
In the Queen's name I do command you rise, and presently to go along with us.
And Merry riseth up.
With all my heart. What, do you know the cause?
We partly do. When saw you Master Beach?
I do not well remember who you mean.
Not Beach, the chandler upon Lambert Hill?
Oh, I know the man, but saw him not this fortnight.
I would you would not, for your sister's sake, for yours, for his, and for his harmless boy. Be not obdurate in your wickedness. Confession draws repentance after it.
Well, Master Constable, I do confess I was the man that did them both to death. As for my sister and my harmless man, I do protest they both are innocent.
Your man is fasting old, and hath confessed the manner how and where the deed was done. Therefore, 'twere vain to colour anything. Bring him away.
Oh, brother, woe's me.
I, comfortless, will help to comfort thee.
And they exit. Enter Truth.
Weep, weep, poor souls, and interchange your woes. Now, Mary, change thy name and countenance. Smile not, thou wretched creature, least in scorn thou smile to think on thy extremities. Thy woes were countless for thy wicked deeds. Thy sister's death need not increase the for thou couldst never number them before. Gentles, help out with this, suppose I pray, and think it truth, for truth doth tell the tale. Mary, by law convict as principal, receives his doom to hang till he be dead, and afterwards for to be hanged in chains. Williams and Rachael likewise are convict for their concealment. Williams craves his book, and so receives a brand of infamy. And wretched Rachael's sex denies that grace, and therefore doth receive a doom of death, to die with him whose sins she did conceal. Your eyes shall witness of their shaded types, which many here did see performed indeed. For as for Fallerio, not his homely weeds, his beardless face, nor counterfeited speech can shield him from deserved punishment. But what he thinks shall rid him from suspect, shall drench him in more waves of wretchedness, pulling his son into relentless jaws of hungry death on tree of infamy. Here comes the Duke. Here comes the Duke that dooms them both to die. Next Mary's death shall end this tragedy.
And they exit. Wow, there's some spoilers coming at us in this sort of Brechtian fashion. That is, some of which is a bit of a surprise. I mean, I was expecting Mary to die. Williams manages to get away with just a light branding because he presumably can speak some neck verse. Rachael's gonna die by the looks of it. Receive a doom of death. That's not looking good. And Fallerio looks like he's dragging his son down as well. So a lot of innocents are gonna, or at least borderline innocents are gonna get some bad stuff's gonna come down on them. Question of justice. It may not end out that way, I suppose. Lois.
Fallerio's not really dragging his son down. I mean, his son wants to die anyway. It's a case of suicide by cop, isn't it?
Why does Rachel's sex deny her the grace that Williams gets? I'm not quite sure I understand that. Williams craves his book.
Lois.
I think it's benefit of clergy, isn't it? I mean, if you could, the idea is if you were able to read, then according to the medieval law at the time when pretty much the only people that could read were clergy, then you got off because clergy couldn't be executed, I think, by civilian courts, something like that. And because she's a woman, she can't be a member of the clergy. So I think it's not necessarily that she can't read, but that she just can't claim this privilege.
Yes, shall we say death by the patriarchy there. Lynn.
Oh, again.
Yes, that. But I think also, I mean, that might be a kind of veneer for it. But practically speaking, she continued to be an accessory after the fact, and Williams turned state's evidence. So, I think in practical terms, and maybe I'm thinking too much like a 21st century American, Williams, what in fact happened is she got a plea bargain, and Rachael didn't have that opportunity because she continued to hide the crime until the very last minute.
And there's all sorts of work going on in this scene. I mean, I don't know how Mary's bed enters. There's no indication how that works, but it does feel like the bed's quietly wheeled on in the midst of some of the business, or it might be within an inner place. But the way the constable comes on and takes his nightcap away from him, and wakey wakey, oh look, he's sweating, he must be guilty. Do you know when did you last see Master Beach? And Mary going, who do you mean, officer? Just going, no, we know you know who he is. That's just such a terrible lie. And then he does this bit which is, and he just goes, yeah, all right, I did it.
Yeah.
And which is not wholly implausible. It reminds me of the television series that was looking at Des recently, where he just goes, yeah, there are a few more bodies around the back. Because the jig is up, and it's clearly up. So yeah, I'm liking the constable. I think the constable is a very well drawn and believable person. Francis.
Yeah, I like that bit at the beginning where the constables were coming along and they were saying, "Who would have thought it? Mary, a wicked murderer, and him a churchgoer as well."
Yeah, Lois.
Yeah, somehow I'd missed the fact that he's thought of as a Puritan. I mean, that might cast a retrospective light over that bit where Rachael was asking whether Williams had sworn to keep quiet, because they say here that he wouldn't swear at all. I mean, that he didn't believe in oaths. So that might have been a rather different tone, that little conversation.
Yes, more layers than we perhaps think. I think we mentioned, it might have been off camera. We were just talking about how Mary's the kind of person who, when you interview the neighbours later, they're going, "Oh, we wouldn't have, I never knew anything." And yeah, we get a little bit from the Watchman doing the same sort of job here. So it's exactly that kind of thing. Okay, any more for London? We will return to London, but we have. As truth has told us, 2 more effectively scenes to go. We nip back to Italy for the conclusion there, and then we're back for basically the thrilling conclusion. Act 5 is all the deaths, the executions inferred, and set down. Okay, Act 5, Scene 1. Enter the Duke, Vesuvio, Turqualo, whatever his name was, Alberto, and Fallerio, disguised.
Where is that siren, that incarnate fiend, monster of nature, spectacle of shame, blot and confusion of his family, false seeming semblance of true dealing trust? I mean Fallerio, bloody murderer. Hath he confessed his cursed treachery, or will he stand to prove his innocence?
We have attached Fallerio, gracious lord, and did accuse him with Portillo's death. But he, remote, will not confess himself, neither the means nor author of the same. His mighty vows and protestations do almost seem to plead integrity, but that we all do know the contrary.
I know your error stricts your knowledge blind. His seeming me doth so delude your mind.
Then bring him forth to answer for himself, since he stands stoutly to deny the deed.
Alberto and another goes to fetch Allenso.
His son can witness that the dying man accused Fallerio for his treachery. Stand forth, thou close-disguised hypocrite, and speak directly to these articles. First, didst thou hire 2 bloody murderers to massacre Portillo in a wood?
I never did suborn such murderers, but ever loved Portillo as my life.
Thy son can witness to the contrary.
I have no son to testify so much.
No, for his gravity is counterfeit. Pluck off his beard, and you will swear it so.
Have you no son? Doth not Allenso live?
Allenso lives, but is no son of mine.
Indeed, his better part had not his source. Thy corrupt, vice-affecting heart, for virtue is the mark he aimeth at.
I dare be sworn that Sostrata would blush, shouldst thou deny Allenso for thy son.
Nay, did she live, she would not challenge me to be the father of that hapless son.
Nay, then anon you will deny yourself to be yourself, unjust Fallerio.
I do confess myself to be myself, but will not answer to Fallerio.
Not to Fallerio? This is excellent. You are the man who was called Fallerio.
He never breathed yet that called me so, except you were deceived as you are now.
This impudence shall not excuse your fault. You are well known to be Fallerio, the wicked husband of that Sostrata, and father to the virtuous Allenso. And even as sure as all these certainties, thou didst contrive thy little nephew's death.
True, for I am not false, Fallerio, husband nor father, as you do suggest, and therefore did not hire the murderers, which, to be true, acknowledge with your eyes.
And pulls off his disguise.
How now, my lords? This is a miracle, to shake off 30 years so suddenly, and turn from feeble age to flourishing youth.
He, my lord, that first wrought this miracle, is not of power to free himself from death through the performance of this sudden change.
No, were he the chiefest hope of Christendom, he should not live for this presumption. Use no excuse, Allenso, for thy life. My doom of death shall be irrevocable.
I'll fare his soul that would extenuate the rigour of your life-confounding doom. I am prepared with all my heart to die, for that's the end of humane misery.
Then thus, you shall be hanged immediately, for your illusion of the magistrates with borrowed shapes of false antiquity.
Thrice happy sentence, which I do embrace with a more fervent and unfeigned zeal than an ambitious rule-desiring man would do a gem-bedecked diadem, which brings more watchful cares and discontent than pomp or honour can remunerate. When I am dead, let it be said of me, Allenso died to set his father free.
That were a freedom worse than servitude to cruel Turk or damned infidel. Most righteous judge, I do appeal for justice. Justice on him that hath deserved death. Not on Allenso, he is innocent.
But I am guilty of abetting him, contrary to his majesty's edict, and therefore death is meritorious.
I am the wretch that did suborn the slaves to murder poor Portillo in the wood. Spare Allenso, he's innocent.
What strange appeal is this? We know thee not. None but Fallerio is accused hereof.
Then, father, get you hence, depart in time, lest, being known, you suffer for the crime.
Depart and leave thee clad in horror's cloak, and suffer death for true affection. Although my soul be guilty of more sin than ever sinful soul were guilty of, yet fiends of hell would never suffer this. I am thy father, though unworthy so. Oh, still I see these weeds do fear your eyes.
And puts off his disguise.
I am Fallerio, make no doubt of me, though thus disguised in habit, countenance, only to scape the terror of the law.
And I, Allenso, that did succour him, 'gainst your commandment, mighty sovereign. Ponder your oath, your vow, as God did live. I should not live if I did rescue him. I did. God lives, and will revenge it home if you defer my condign punishment.
Assure yourselves you both shall suffer death, but for Fallerio he shall hang in chains after he is dead, for he was principal.
Unsavoury wormwood, hemlock, bitter gall, brings no such bad, unrelished sour taste unto the voice as this death-boding voice brings to the ears of poor Fallerio. Not for myself, but for Allenso's sake, whom I have murdered with my treachery. Ah, my dread lord, if any little spark of melting pity doth remain alive, and not extinguished by my impious deeds, O kindle it unto a happy flame, to light Allenso from this misery, which through dim death he's like to fall into.
That were to overthrow my soul and all. Should you reverse this sentence of my death, myself would play the death man on myself, and overtake your swift and winged soul, ere churlish Charon had transported you unto the fields of sad Proserpina.
Cease, Fallerio, in thy bootless prayers. I am resolved, I am inexorable. Vesuvio, see their judgment be performed, and use Allenso with all clemency, provided that the law be satisfied.
And exit the Duke and Alberto.
It shall be done with all respectiveness. Have you no doubt of that, my gracious lord?
Here is mercy mixed with equity, to show him favour, but cut off his head.
My reverend father, pacify yourself. I can and will endure the stroke of death, were his appearance near so horrible, to meet Portillo in another world.
Thou shouldst have tarried until nature's course had been extinct, that thou, or grown with age, mightst die the death of thy progenitors. 'Twas not thy means he died so suddenly, but mine, that causing his, hath murdered thee.
But yet I slew my mother, did I not?
I, with reporting of my villainy, The very audit of my wickedness had force enough to give a sudden death. Ah, sister, sister, now I call to mind thy dying words, now proved a prophecy. If you deal ill with this distressed child, God will no doubt revenge the innocent I have dealt ill, and God hath ta'en revenge.
Now let us leave remembrance of past deeds and think on that which more concerneth us.
With all my heart thou ever wert the spur which pricked me on to any godliness, and now thou doest endeavour to incite me make my parting peace with God and man. I do confess, even from my very soul, my heinous sin and grievous wickedness against my Maker many thousand ways. Ab emo cordis, I repent myself of all my sins against his majesty. And Heavenly Father, lay not to my charge the death of poor Portillo and those men which I suborned to be his murderers, when I appear before thy heavenly throne to have my sentence or life, or of life or death.
Amen. Amen. And God continues still these mercy-moving meditations.
And thou, great God, which art omnipotent, powerful, enough for to redeem our souls, even from the very gates of gaping hell, forgive our sins and wash away our faults in the sweet river of that precious blood which thy dear Son did shed in Golgotha for the remission of all contrite souls.
Forgive thy death, my thrice beloved Son.
I do, and Father, pardon my misdeeds of disobedience and unthankfulness.
Thou never yet wert disobedient, unless I did command unlawfulness. Ungratefulness did never trouble thee. Thou art too bounteous thus to guerdon me.
Come, let us kiss and thus embrace in death. Even when you will come, bring us to the place where we may consummate our wretchedness and change it for eternal happiness.
And they exit to die. Okay, I'm noticing in the chat not a lot of sympathy for Allenso. Who I have to say, Allenso, there was a lot in this plan where maybe death was going to come, but I think his death is a little excessive. I think the Duke does not need to kill him. Lock him up for a bit, take all his possessions, but he really hasn't done enough to warrant death. This is a gross miscarriage of justice. I'm sorry, I'm there. But the Duke is resolved. He is inexorable. So, what can you do there? Thoughts on the room, Briony?
Yeah, I felt something for Allenso when I thought maybe he just, would rather just be dead than have to deal with all of this. But he actually seems to genuinely want to help his dad. So I don't understand that at all. What an idiot.
Valentina.
Yeah, I mean, Allenso's wasting the Duke's time. That's what it is. But I think my
therefore
favorite
death.
And yes. So what is this parade of costumes and stuff? But my favorite bit is when Fallerio goes to his help, to help him, and the Duke goes "Oh, who's this guy? We don't want him. Go away." And Allenso turns around and goes "Go away, father." And I was like,
yeah,
but we can.
But we can assume a lot of these are asides, or that they're sort
still,
of,
Dad, I'm like,
you're embarrassing
on,
me.
I was like, what the hell?
Eric, then Lois.
Yeah, I'm starting to suspect that Allenso was basically the second Waterman from yesterday.
No, I think their modus operandi is slightly different. Lois.
No, it's all family loyalty. I mean, he's behaving exactly like Rachael. Rachael was worried that if she turned her brother in, everybody would be pointing at her and saying, "Look, there's the woman that turned her brother in." So it's the same thing, really. Look, I don't think he wants to be the young man that turned his father in. And he's got an incredible sense of his duty as a son, which one does get in quite a lot of plays, actually.
But the way he plays the scene before the father reveals itself is he's going, well, I'm not really Fallerio. If he's sacrificing himself for his father, then just continue to protect, because the disguise is working. But he seems to want it both ways, is to say, I am. He wants to actually reveal himself and then hope he gets away on some level, which, is not a great plan, but it vaguely makes sense.
I suppose that's the story he's given his father, and he's kind of keeping to it, but also hoping that they'll go ahead and execute him. I mean, it's not very clear, but I think that must be the idea.
Well, no, because he's saying to the Duke, I'm not Fallerio. Long before Fallerio reveals himself, he's sort of equivocating, but he's really moving in the general direction of I am not Fallerio. I am not false Fallerio, husband nor father, as you do suggest. I mean, so it seems to be that he's trying to work it so that he can give his father time to escape, and then hopefully get off, which in both instances do not work. Not with this Duke. Briony, then Eric.
I'm looking to the history buffs on this one. Is there like an older meaning for the word consummate that would make that make sense in the context? Because it seems a really odd word to use based on the modern understanding that I have of it.
Yeah. I mean, in the Latin translation of the New Testament, when Christ on the cross, his last breath, he says, "It is finished." In the English translation, the Latin is consummatum est. To sort of consummate is to finish something, is to bring it to a closure. So he's actually invoking the crucifixion when he says consummate, because consummatum est, it is finished, were Jesus' last words.
Whereas Fallerio does seem to have undergone some, we were sort of questioning his motivation and how everything was working earlier. But it does seem that on some level he is doing a relatively selfless act here at the end of just going, no, don't kill him, kill me. It doesn't work, which does rend it into a sort of tragic... There is a genuinely tragic dimension to what happens to Allenso here, and what is going to happen to Rachael as well. I feel that's where the tragedy lies. It's not in Merry and Fallerio, it's in people who get caught on the edges of these terrible crimes. Eric?
I was gonna say maybe sort of Allenso's confession part, like I'm not Fallerio, but I'm actually, someone else. Maybe that's sort of his opportunity to, like with the suicide note, it's kind of like taking ownership of his death kind of way. I don't know if that's me just sort of reading too much into it or making it sort of romanticizing it in a way, but yeah.
I also just want to flag up Fallerio's slightly sarky line when the Duke exits. Here is a mercy mixed with equity to show him favour, but cut off his head. I like that. Rachael, did you have something?
No, I wonder if Allenso says these things and was talking the way that he's talking because he can't tell a lie. He just can't do it. Like I feel like this is a true crime thing, but certain parts of this seem to dip into morality play territory. And he's dressed up the truth. He's disguised, but he can't actually physically bring himself to tell a lie.
Yeah, but he did. As of yet, we have no evidence as to whether any cherry trees have been taken out. Going to Act 5, Scene 2, as we need to close the play. Enter Merry and Rachael to execution with officers with halberds, the hangman with a ladder, etc.
Now, Sister Rachael, is the hour come wherein we both must satisfy the law for Beech's death and harmless Winchester. Weep not, sweet sister, for that cannot help. I do confess for all this company that thou wert never privy to their deaths, but only helpst me when the deed was done to wipe the blood and hide away my sin. And since this fault hath brought thee to this shame, I do entreat thee on my bended knee to pardon me for thus offending thee.
I do forgive you from my very soul. And think not that I shed this store of tears, for that I prize my life, or fear to die, though I confess the manner of my death is much more grievous than my death itself. But I lament for that it hath been said, I was the author of this cruelty, and did produce you to this wicked deed, whereof God knows that I am innocent.
Indeed thou art. Thy conscience is at peace, and feels no terror for such wickedness. Mine hath been vexed, but is now at rest, for that I am assured my heinous sin shall never rise in judgment against my soul, but that the blood of Jesus Christ hath power to make my purple sin as white as snow.
And at some point he goes up the ladder.
One thing, good people, witness here with me, that I do die in perfect charity, and do forgive as I would be forgiven, first of my God and then of all the world. Cease publishing that I have been a man trained up in murder or in cruelty, for this time, and this time is all too soon, I never slew or did consent to kill. So help me God, as this I speak is true. I could say something of my innocence in fornication and adultery, but I confess the justest man alive that bears about the frailty of a man cannot excuse himself from daily sin, in thought, in word, and deed. Such was my life. I never hated Beach in all my life, only desire of money which he had, and the inciting of that foe of man, that greedy gulf, that great Leviathan, did hale me on to these calamities, for which even now my very soul doth bleed. God strengthen me with patience to endure this chastisement, which I confess too small a punishment for this my heinous sin. Oh, be courageous, sister, fight it well. We shall be crowned with immortality.
I will not faint, but combat manfully. Christ is of power to help and strengthen me.
Pray make haste. The hour is almost past.
I am prepared. O God, receive my soul. Forgive my sins, for they are numberless. Receive me, God, for now I come to thee.
And he's turned off the ladder, and Rachael shrinketh.
Nay, shrink not, woman. Have a cheerful heart.
Aye, so I do, and yet this sinful flesh will be rebellious against my willing spirit. Come, let me climb these steps that lead to heaven, although they may seem the stairs of infamy. Let me be mirror to ensuing times, and teach all sisters how they do conceal the wicked deeds of brethren or of friends. I not repent me of my love to him, but that thereby I have provoked God to heavy wrath and indignation, which turn away, great God, for Christ's sake. O Harry Williams, thou wert chiefest cause that I do drink of this most bitter cup, for hadst thou opened Beech's death at first, the boy had lived, and thou hadst saved my life. But thou art branded with a mark of shame, and I forgive thee from my very soul. Let him and me learn all that hear of this, to utter brothers or their masters miss. Conceal no murders, lest it do beget more blood deeds of like deformity. Thus God forgive my sins, receive my soul, and though my dinner be of bitter death, I hope my soul shall sup with Jesus Christ, and see his presence everlastingly.
And she dieth.
The Lord of heaven have mercy on her soul, and teach all others by this spectacle to shun such dangers as she ran into by her misguided taciturnity. Cut down their bodies, give hers a funeral, but let his body be conveyed hence to Mile End Green, and there be hanged in chains.
And they exit. Enter Truth.
See here the end of lucre and desire, of riches gotten by unlawful means. What monstrous evils this hath brought to pass, your scarce dry eyes give testimony. give testimonial. The father, son, the sister, brother brings to open scandal and contemptuous death.
And enter homicide and covetousness.
But here come they that wrought these deeds of ruth, as if they meant to plot new wickedness. Whether so fast, you damned miscreants, ye vain deluders of the credulous, that seek to train men to destruction?
Why, we will on to set more harms afloat, that I may swim in rivers of warm blood, outflowing from the sides of innocence.
I will entice the greedy-minded soul to pull the fruit from the forbidden tree. Yet Tantal-like he shall but glut his eye, not feed his body with salubrious fruit.
Hence, stigmatics, you shall not harbor here to practice execrable butcheries. Myself will bring your close designs to light and overthrow your viled conspiracies. No heart shall entertain a murderous thought within the sea-embracing continent, where fair Eliza, prince of piety, doth wear the peace-adorned diadem.
Augur the worst, I will have many hearts that shall affect my secret whisperings, and chink of gold is such a pleasing cry that all men wish to hear such harmony. And I will place stern murder by my side, that we may do more harms than haughty pride.
Truth, now farewell. Hereafter thou shalt see I'll vex thee more with many tragedies.
The more the pity. Would the heart of man were so open wide to entertain the harmful baits of self-devouring sin. But from the first unto the latter times, it hath and will be so eternally. Now it remains to have your good advice unto a motion of some consequence. There is a baroque that's newly rigged for sea, unmanned, unfurnished with munition. She must encounter with a greater foe than great Alcides slew in Lerna Lake. Would you be pleased to man this willing bark with good conceits of her intention, to store her with the thundering furniture of smoothest smiles and pleasing plaudits? She shall be able to endure the shock of snarling Zoilus and his cursed crew that seeks to sink her in reproach's waves, and may perchance obtain a victory gainst curious carps and fawning parasites. But if you suffer her for want of aid to be overwhelmed by her insulting foes, oh, then she sinks that meant to pass the flood with stronger force to do her country good. It resteth thus, whether she live or die, she is your beadsman everlastingly.
And the play ends. And we've had a similar sort of hanging scene like this quite recently. We were talking about the logistics of hanging in Thomas More, which in date-wise is pretty much bang on top of this, or at least its first iteration of the manuscript. So there's a really interesting question about maybe there's a theatre company that's particularly keen on the hanging, having got a live hanging setup that they want to cram it into as many plays as possible. That's just random speculation, especially as we don't know where this play is situated in that sense. But yeah, we get a double hanging. Two people throw themselves off after making their death speeches. I'm particularly interested in Mary's cease publishing that I have been a man trained up in murder or in cruelty. That interests me. It feels slightly pointed in that sense of there's a bit too much of that kind of salacious stuff in print these days. Again, it might be from the source. I don't know. But yeah, it's really interesting. Thoughts from the room about this end to Mary and Rachael, Lynn?
Does anybody want to explain the extended description of the bark to me? Is that a metaphor? Are we talking about a literal ship? Is this before the Spanish Armada? I'm sorry, I'm being really thick about this. I have no idea what's going on with that.
Lois.
Yeah, I think that ship is the play. I mean, there's something like it at the end of a play that's partly by Fletcher, The Two Noble Kinsmen, where I think there's something about do but tack about and hold your helping hands out. We will do something to save us. I mean, there's this idea that we might drown, but if you hold out your helping hands, our ship might make it to land. And it's one of the images that's sometimes used for a play. I mean, the other one is a virgin who is terrified of being defiled, but is still virginal because she's only just come in front of this crowd.
Oh, okay. The play itself. All right. I'll buy that.
Yeah, I think it's a very elaborate plaudite, asking people to applaud. That plaudiat is plaudite. I think that must be what they need.
Other thoughts in the room? Eric?
I find it interesting. Obviously, this is a tragedy and so on and so forth. But I mean, it's interesting that they don't get away with it the way Promos did. Then again, I guess murder is sort of like a different crime to, basically what Promos did. But yeah, it's interesting sort of the different versions of stories you get in these kind of things. Also because, this play has a lot of references to Greek myth, which is, I don't know, it's just like too much. Yeah.
Well, it was mostly in the Italian plot, though. Did we get much Greek myth in London? I don't think we did. Yeah, and there's a sort of bit muchness about the way the Italian plot was written in that sense. But yeah, other thoughts about Mary and Rachael and that final scene? Francis?
Yeah, I found the bit where Rachael shrank back. It's a very poignant moment. Her being a woman and everything, and that whole ending is obviously meant to sort of deter the audience from indulging in these activities themselves.
But it's interesting, she shrinks back, and then the officer has that line, "Have a cheerful heart." There's something
weird. How do you say
yeah. There's it's gallows humour, I suppose.
Or trying to just sort of say, be brave, rather. I don't know if cheerful could also just mean not happy, but just kind of courage.
Yeah.
Because the officer makes a big distinction between the brother and the sister, because, the sister gets a proper burial and the brother's going to be hanged up in chains.
Yeah, take him to Mile End Green, because, presumably that's the next one on the rota.
Yeah.
I don't know what the system is. I'm sure there is a system. Someone's got to do the paperwork, I'm sure. Yeah, the officer's really quite get on with it at times.
Well, yes, he says, come on, hurry up,
Hour's almost past. I've got to do it on the hour, within an hour, otherwise I don't get my bonus. Some of us have got drinking to do. Francis?
I think an executioner's job was to sort of get it all done as swiftly and as painlessly as possible. Well, perhaps not painlessly, but as swiftly as possible, so that everything was orderly and probably sometimes to be as merciful as possible, because these people, despite their crimes, were going to die. And
And, murder and covetousness are just in their element when they come on. Just going, oh, God, swim in rivers of warm blood. That's what you do after a long day, isn't it?
How did you know?
Okay. We've had lengthy. I don't know if we've had lengthy logistical discussions about onstage hangings, but this one does seem to be very much of the case of that. This is demonstrated act. It doesn't seem that it's being hidden. And so we've had lengthy discussions about how this would be practically achieved, not necessarily on camera actually. In fact, our resident hang person is not available today, but I feel a session on just the practicalities of doing a hanging safely is one for future reference, because you get two and they're hanging there, and he talks about hanging them down. So. Right.
How would they have done it? Yeah.
Okay, we're approaching time for final thoughts from around the room. For those who've been here for all sessions, feel free to comment overall over everything as well as today. And as ever, our angle of what do we do with it, of which this has so many potential aspects to be doing today, both as in its entirety, but also in the sense that we have got two separate plot strands that maybe we want to play around with individually as well as together. I have to say, when I initially started, I wasn't that fussed about retaining the structural integrity of the piece, but I have to say, by the end of it, I do feel it does actually function. The weird juxtaposition of the two does seem to flow and keep the interest going, but I might still trim some of the Italians. Just to soup some of those speeches just a tad long, in my opinion. So, final thoughts around the room. Dan, you've only been here for today, so I'll unfairly start with you. Any final thoughts you want to throw in?
I do wish I was here for the rest of the play, because it does seem... I've not read anything like this. I think it's very interesting. Just the lengths it'll go to show, to talk about, demonstrate, stage these murders there. It's not very profound what I've got to say about it. More of what I'm interested in at this point is, of course, how it's been printed. Because it's interesting for me that this was printed by Richard Reed, who also printed Thomas Lord Cromwell, with these really specific stage directions, one of which interests me. I brought up a couple of weeks ago, where it's Lois was looking it up for me. When it does the sides, it actually says "to the people" in the margins. I've not seen that before, or in one circumstance, just people. The specifics of the directions, whereas they don't talk about like stage properties, for example, a bed is not mentioned on there, does lead me to believe that these are possibly somebody being over-directed, possibly an author who's telling people when to actual, timing-wise, we're going to have 15 stabs here of a hammer, come on, who's going to actually count that out here? So somebody's going to come in, somebody's going to wait. These are all kinds of timing things that seem very authorial, because nobody practically would actually try to go off and do these things. Certainly not somebody who wants to tell people how to stage it would tell them, you must do this and then do this and then take off your disguise at this point and you're going to do an aside over here. No, that doesn't seem right. And it's interesting to me that Thomas Lord Cromwell is also includes these types of stage directions by the same printer. So who knows where to go with that. But that's my observation for the day.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a neglected play, I'm feeling, I have to say, in terms of it's definitely in terms of its stageability and its liveliness, shall we say liveliness, or shall we say deathliness. Valentina, you similarly have been here for a couple of sessions. You missed the opening carnage in London.
Yeah, and I regret that very much. I'll have to go back and watch it. I still like it. Like yesterday, I was still finding great fun. I would probably cut out all the truth and stuff and just put on the two murders, the two plot lines. But maybe no. Maybe they work very well as a voice of God kind of like situation there. But yeah, I weirdly, yes, the Italian stuff, it seems a bit long, but I really quite enjoy it. It's almost like a juxtaposition of like the more like gritty drama and the more like epic kind of like murder stories and that kind of stuff. It's quite nice. I don't have anything intelligent to say about it.
No, it's all good stuff. I mean, the only problem with trimming out Truth is that Truth has a very useful monologue during the soaring up of the body. It's basically bring on Truth to vamp for a bit to cover it, and it's an interesting juxtaposition. But yeah, no, I agree. We've got lots of elements here that we could do things with. And hey, the author's dead. You can do what you like. Lynn, any final thoughts?
I have two separate things. I just want to point out that in all our discussions of how different the two plot threads are, the Italian being much more rhetorical and metaphorical and speechy, and the London plot being kind of more gritty and so forth, nobody has said, I wonder if this is two short plays that somebody interleaved together. And I certainly don't feel like that would be the case. That seems to be nobody's intuition, that these came from separate sources. So there is something kind of unified about them. The sound or the rhythm of the verse, it feels like one voice sort of ventriloquizing. It doesn't feel like two things that somebody artificially brought together. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, when we talk about, how would we do this? What are some, I think it would be really interesting to do maybe a video production of this and double characters across the two plays to sort of create equivalences. Your murderer is the same actor, and maybe Rachael, the sister, is the son in the Italian plot, or something like that. So kind of have structural equivalents for characters and have them double that way. I just think that might create a really interesting effect and give and strengthen the sense of unity that this is one aesthetic object.
Yeah. Especially, yes, if we think about a different medium where we can, if the practical doubling on stage doesn't work, then if we're thinking in a digital format, then yeah, absolutely, why not? Yeah, I like that. I'm really interested now in actually picking apart the parallels between the two a bit more and making sure that those things are more apparent as we go. Briony, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I loved it. I love a bit of darkness. I love how graphic it is at times. Like, brilliant, bring it on. But I also, one thing I noticed with it that I liked is the way the choice of the three vice virtues that we've got is kind of like the deed, the motivation for doing the deed, and the downfall of the deed. The truth, covetousness, and murder. I think that's a nice little dynamic to have, which, again, having these two kind of cohesive but separate at the same time plots, you've also then got the vice virtues to bring it together.
Yeah, like that. Yes, we haven't really talked too much about actually the potential. We've got these three figures that could be wandering around, pulling the strings at times, and that they could have a more visual, malign or presence. Because Truth is a hard character as well. I mean, they're not. Truth it shines a bright light and it blinds sometimes. Alan, final thoughts.
I must admit, I still can't quite see this working. It feels to me like a bit of a rag bag of bits pulled together. I mean, I think we've got something like 15 corpses in terms of the body count throughout, and certainly in the early stages I think it will be incredibly difficult to stage particularly the London deaths without actually getting the audience laughing out of shock as much as anything else. And also, I'm always very unhappy with plays which contain, as this one did towards the end, extensive moralising, deathbed repentance, and the rest of it. I just find them unsatisfying.
Lois, final thoughts?
Yeah, I'm intrigued by these 2 plays in one, 4 plays in one. There are just a few of these that have survived, but there seem to have been a lot more. And I don't know how they were done. I mean, the only complete example, I think, is one that Fletcher did with various other people. And I think there are 4 plays, and they've kind of tried to work out who else was collaborating with him on some of them, or whether anybody was. And that particular group is a kind of ragbag. It just seemed to be 4 short plays that people put together. The Yorkshire Tragedy, which we'll probably get around to reading sometime, is a very good short play. And it says on the title page that it was one of, I think, 5 plays in one, a group that was called All's One. That's also a play about somebody who tries to murder his whole family. I mean, they seem to have gone particularly for true crime stories. So I don't know. It's really interesting to figure out how this was quite obviously put together very carefully, and the framework is designed to hold it together and stress the parallels or contrasts or whatever. But it could well be 2 different authors. I mean, we've been talking about the difference in style between them, and that would be one obvious explanation, as opposed to one very clever author trying to make them as different as possible.
Yes, we have done a Yorkshire Tragedy. We did it over a year ago.
Oh, wow.
Long time ago. But yes, I wonder whether the nature of these sort of true crimes or anything that sort of comes from ballad sources and, relatively short texts that maybe it's just straightforwardly easy, trying to stretch out a plot over the entire length of a show is actually quite difficult to do, and just knowing when you've only got so much material to do it. I mean, it's interesting that this interweaves the two, and that it does that deliberately in a way, rather than doing one play after another. And there's always a bit of a problem when you do double bills or triple bills or whatever, is that you start ranking the bills. I enjoyed this one, I didn't enjoy that one. You can't win. It's very difficult to get a 5-star review for a double bill, just simply because one of the bills will not be as good in the mind of the viewer. And this one does make I think an attempt to sort of sidestep that problem. Though whether it succeeds or not, I don't know. Francis, any final thoughts? You've only been here today. You've been a wrong-un, but you repented, sort of.
Yeah, it's an interesting play. I mean, it's helped my interest, and he does feel like a strange mashup of genre. But God knows we've seen those before in this group. And I'm sorry I missed. I'm sorry I missed the previous sessions. I really like Lynn's idea of doubling up. To sort of link the 2 halves of the play, as it were. And I hope we do a second look on this, because I'd quite like to get into the character of Fallerio a bit more.
Yeah, I have to say it's quite high up on my list to get. The problem is there's a lot of competition at the high end of the list, but it is one that, I'm liking very much for that. Eric, any final thoughts?
First of all, you have a list. Wow. Yeah, I'm kidding. You are more organized than any of us here. I was just gonna say that it's weirdly reminding me of, like, because I was trying to think, what other plays have we done. Obviously, I mentioned Promising Cassandra and like lots of other plays that are similar. But the thing that struck me is that it's a bit like a neoclassical tragedy. Like the stuff that we've been doing, like sort of Tragedy of Cleopatra, Tragedy of, Misfortunes of Arthur, that kind of stuff. Because it's very, like, it tells you from the beginning what's going to happen. They're going to die. Something is, And also it ties the loose ends up quite neatly. Not perfectly, but like, as neatly as could be done with 2 plays in one kind of thing. 2 stories in one. And it feels very sort of like, the bad guys get their comeuppance, which seems very, very neoclassical to me. I don't know, maybe that's just me. Yeah, as opposed to sort of having I don't know, or it's a mixture of a neoclassical tragedy with a morality play, maybe.
I mean, what I like about actually the ending, because the ending's just so uncompromising. the punishments are, it's death. You get death. And just the way that actually these murders have just torn apart everything. It's, we watch an awful lot of drama, cop shows, etc., where the murder is a thing that happens and people just sort of skim through it and they're all sort of fine. But actually, the reality of these acts is that they just destroy everything, and actually justice is almost as bad. Certainly in this society. There is no difference in punishment between Mary and Rachael. Mary, who used a hammer 21 times on 2 victims, and Rachael, who cleaned the bloodstains, and that's basic, and carried the body a few feet, and that they get the same punishment. So there's something interestingly uncompromising about it that I think lands in a really interesting way, even though it's still also doing all the cop things and all the sort of straightforward entertainment things that we're really used to. Lalitte, any final thoughts?
Yeah, this may not apply as much to this play as some others. So I was thinking about ways of making the staging kind of acceptable to a modern audience, but also Brechtian. And I wondered if the vice figures could be done as puppets. Mm-hmm. Whenever you get an allegorical figure in play, and that could allow you to kind of distinguish between the more psychologized real figures and then the ones who are abstract. And it might be something that could also resolve the problems of large casts as well, because you can have someone openly working a puppet and playing 2 roles. And my other thought, which is a totally different one, was my memory of Spanish plays of this period seem to be where the comeuppances of villains at the end is much more politicized in Spanish. I've got a very strong memory of aristocrats being garroted at the National Theatre in kind of very angry Spanish plays. Whereas here, the deaths of people don't seem to change society much. They all seem quite, particularly on the British side, they're quite sort of ordinary people, sort of from the middle classes.
Yeah, we haven't talked about class at all, actually, which is an interesting additional element here about the various statuses, because the people in Italy seem to have a much higher status than the sort of middling sort and slightly lower than middling sort that we've got in London. And there might be something that could be made of that, actually, in terms of the visual dynamics of the costuming. That should be it immediately tells you're in a different part of the story just simply by the clothes that people would be wearing. And it's actually a very strong reason to keep this in an original costuming, original setting. Sometimes you go, we can update it. Maybe this one resists it because actually the advantage there is so big.
I'm not sure any of these plays should be updated yet because they're so unfamiliar to us in a way. The first sight of them for the public, you almost don't want to get too much in the way of messing about with them. It's hard enough just to make them clear.
Rachael, final thoughts?
I know we've done scene workshops before, but I was wondering if a second look or maybe a character workshop could be done, because you have Mary and you have Allenso that are kind of really interesting. There's something that this playwright does with those 2 characters that's very interesting. And then about the vice figures, because there are I think the other day Eric was saying that, he did say something about doubling too. And I think there's like scenes, where you'd have to come in pretty quick if people are doubling the vices, the main characters are doubling the vices. But if they were in mask, the vice characters were in mask and the virtue character was in mask. That's something you could do. And then also a question for somebody in this room probably knows is, did they have stage hands back then? What did they do with things like that?
Ooh, that's one of those big questions, of which there is no absolute definitive answer. There's a lot of suspicion that, yes, there's an awful lot of... that there might be. We know that a little later on, there's quite a well-defined series of roles that exist backstage, and if we project them back to the early modern, that in some theatres they might have existed, but we don't know for certain. There seems to be a certain reasonable expectation that you might have some people effectively just grabbing actors and throwing them on stage when it's their cue. But again, we're projecting forward there to sort of later 17th, early 18th century kind of stuff. It may apply. It might not. We don't know. Did I over or understate that? Anyone? I'm looking at Dan and Lois.
Well, that seems about right.
Yeah. Possibly is the answer. Yeah. Any more for any more? We're technically overrunning a little bit, but I can briefly go to Eric.
I was just gonna say that, like, if for, let's say, even for a second look on Zoom or on stage or whatever, it's still quite a difficult play to stage just because of the props that you'd need to make. Like, I mean, or you'd have to have Mary literally cutting up something. Or someone.
I'm going to say, if I play Mary, I don't have a problem with that. I do have some things sitting around I can use. So I'm not saying I'm playing Mary.
Yeah.
But
you
actually,
get what I mean.
That's really actually not a problem. And actually, most of the murders happen off stage anyway. I mean, that's the thing is, those initial murders are, in a sense, quite shocking because actually you don't see them. They're more sounds. They've just gone upstairs, and I think actually that's where the number comes in and works, because if you basically go off slightly off stage and you're just hitting a cabbage, you can make some really, really nasty sounds and screams and noises, and it can be that could be unbelievably effective actually. Dan and then Rachael, very quickly.
I was actually going to say that, in my opinion, I think this is I would say not easily stageable play, but can easily. There's many ways I can picture this play being staged, and I don't think much tinkering really needs to be done with making it clear. I think this is only that I came in at the end here and I got completely what was happening here, and I don't think it's because I read the plays all the time. I think it's because the plot's pretty clear, and we know who's on what side. In terms of what Rob is suggesting, yeah, absolutely. If anybody had seen Rose Rage a few years back with Edward Hall, I mean, there's so many ways you can stage murders without actually having them literally shown. With cabbages, for example, of doubling as heads and not necessarily right next to the actor. I mean, we get it. If you're bashing a cabbage head, yeah, we know what you're intending to do there. One other thing is, I do think that I put this in the chat about staging this or having the structure like a police procedural today. I think it would come across very clearly. When I'm talking police procedure, I'm talking, for example, like Law and Order, or something that people get. We get that this is like a true crime story kind of thing.
Rachael, very briefly.
No, I was just going to say about the number thing, that because Rachael comes in with a candle in that scene, that it's, if it's dark, that's possibly their sound cue to come in and give the other actor who's playing Beach enough time to get off the stage. And if they don't have stage hands, to throw the corpse on the ground and then, get out and leave everybody to get their bloody shirts on and change in front of the audience and have it just be very quick.
Yeah, because there's bits of this play that want to go really quick, and some bits that I think are just epically slow, especially when it comes to the murders, is that actually they're stretched out to the nth degree. But anyway, we have really run out of time, even though I feel we could probably discuss the minutiae for a very, very long time. Thanks to all the wonderful readers in the room. It has been a very productive little session, but all that remains, thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye.
Bye.
I will expostulate no more.